the people's minds to accept our solution to the world's problems. The energy crisis here in the United States was exceptionally successful worldwide, and we expect similar success with our upcoming food shortage. Our labor leaders have made great progress by causing confusion and work stoppages in all areas of the world. Financially, the dollar is being devalued even faster than we could have hoped. Politically, the public has lost total confidence in any form of government. The threat of universal war is a daily possibility. As you know, we ourselves do not need to hold any visible office of leadership. As a matter of fact, it's better that we do not. We control the finances, news media, food, transportation, energy. We control everything. It is important that you, as world leaders, keep our program before your countrymen. With our World Bank and computer program operational, we now have the capacity to control the financial affairs of every human being on Earth by giving each person his own computer number. Anytime his number is used, we would know his financial situation at once. He could not buy or sell anything without his computer number. It will simplify their lifestyles tremendously. The end result will be a one-world monetary and government system that we alone will control. Yes.
What about the people who forget their number, or their cards are lost or stolen?
We've made provisions for that. By using this laser imprinter, we can painlessly and permanently affix the person's number to the back of his hand or his forehead if he so desires. The numbers would be easily read by this new ultraviolet scanning equipment. For the purposes of demonstration, I've had such a number imprinted on myself. Once this number is imprinted, it cannot be lost nor can it be changed. Now, are there any questions?
What about the individuals who refuse to have this number implantation?
We expect some minor resistance.
We're going to be going over the world and seeing where bad harvest has been happening, how much has been lost along the way. We're going to go over some percentages and some numbers, and that's going to be hopefully helpful to you to understand kind of globally the big picture of what's happening to the food supply. So let's jump straight in here. First things first. China is now reporting that their winter wheat harvest is probably going to lose about 50% of their winter wheat. That's a huge number. They are very, very disturbed by that, which would kind of explain why they have 70% of the world's corn in their silos currently. They are seeing bad things there. Export bans. Let's talk about the export ban from Ukraine. There is no grains being exported from Ukraine. There's no exports coming out of Hungary. Oh gosh, I think it's that one. There are no grains coming out of Russia. There's also no grains coming, soybeans. No soybeans coming out of Argentina. Those countries have all put export bans in place. Russian exports for the past 8 months have been down 45%. So even though the grain export ban is new, we are now seeing, we've been seeing 45% decrease in grain exports over since the July start. Speaking of Argentina, let's talk about them. They are having the lowest soybean harvest this year. Remember, they got if you're from the northern hemisphere like me, they have inverse seasons down there, right? So right now is harvest season for their soybeans. They are showing that they're going to have the lowest soybean harvest in 14 years. They are a major exporter of soybeans. That's huge. They're saying up to 30% of their soybeans have been lost. 30% of their soybean harvest lost. Over in neighboring Brazil, they're looking at a 15% loss on soybeans. 30% in Argentina lost soybeans. Brazil down 15% on soybeans. Numbers are not yet available on corn. However, the one article that I was able to find, they said that the corn harvest is happening early and it is not looking good. So Argentina is the second largest exporter of corn in the world, and their corn harvest is not looking good. They have a drought in the main growing area in the center of their country. Very bad drought. That is not looking good. The United Kingdom, they're not a major they're not an exporter at all. Actually, they're an importer. But UK crops down 50%. United Kingdom. I wasn't able to find numbers on Netherlands, but Netherlands, by cash basis, is one of the largest exporters of crops. Mostly it's a lot of vegetables and stuff like that. They grow tons and tons of vegetables in their greenhouses that they then ship across all of Europe, and they pay high vegetable costs. So they're like the California of Europe. They haven't been able to heat their greenhouses, and so months ago we've been hearing that it's been catastrophic in the greenhouses there. So we haven't gotten reports out of that just yet. United States, we're talking about 10% winter wheat loss in the United States. That's the projections right now. That is huge. The spring wheat last year, United States was down 44% year over year. A loss of 44% of the spring or summer wheat last year. Obviously, Canada had a really bad harvest as well of hard wheat, which is why we're having this pasta shortage right now. So Canada had a real bad harvest last year of wheat. The United States had a real bad harvest last year of wheat, and this year is shaping up to be significantly down compared to last year as well. And they're saying that the drought in western United States is actually just as bad, if not worse, than what it was last year. A lot of the aquifers have been drained, so we're going to be seeing problems there. A lot of the lakes and reservoirs have been significantly drained, and they are not nearly up to where they were last year, which means they'll be depleted much, much earlier, and they're probably going to have restrictions in place for how much water these states can be drawing out of the Colorado River, which is going to be a lot of irrigation is going to be shut off this year. So a lot of farmers out there are just not going to plant. They know it's coming, they're just not going to plant. So that's huge. Not to mention the diesel and fuel prices out there to run the equipment around the world, plus fertilizer prices are through the roof. Let's get back to the crisis over here in Eastern Europe. Ukraine is a major player in sunflower oil. They have halted exports. Ukraine has halted all grain exports, and Ukraine has halted, we're going to use red here for fertilizer. Ukraine has halted fertilizer exports. Russia has halted fertilizer exports. Belarus has halted fertilizer exports. China has halted fertilizer exports. Those are the big players when it comes to fertilizer, and they're all stopped exporting. The biggest other players are the United States, but the United States doesn't really export very much. Mostly it's all internally consumed. And then Canada. Canada is the big swing player here when it comes to fertilizer, and they're having labor strikes on their railways, which is going to inhibit the export of fertilizer from Canada, quite possibly. So fertilizer is looking very, very bad out there. Ukraine is, they have their winter wheat, which should be harvested in June. It's looking good, but they're supposed to be planting very shortly their corn and their wheat for summer harvest. This is not looking good. Anecdotal reports are coming out of Ukraine that they are not getting their seeds. They're not, people are not transporting fuel. Like the farmers can't get the fuel because it's all being diverted to military. And they cannot get their seeds because no one's willing to transport that across the country to the farmers. This is huge. This may mean that they may lose the majority of their summer wheat and corn crop this year. In addition to that, that's not even talking about how many of them have fled for their safety, right? In addition to that, sunflower, are those going to be planted this year? In addition to that, what happens if they can't harvest the winter wheat? What happens if they don't have fuel to run their tractors and their combines to harvest the winter wheat? If June rolls around and they still don't have fuel, they won't be able to harvest. And that will be a massive, massive loss of grains around the world. Right now, of course, the Black Sea is closed to exports. Ukraine's closed, they're not exporting anything anyway, but both Russia and Ukraine have not been able to ship any of their grains out through the Black Sea ever since a few of the cargo ships started getting hit and blowing up. So that's been bad. So these are just some of the more recent situations that we've seen. I'm going to briefly cover the United States situation with the bird flu because that is huge. It's hard to get information on the bird flu out there about other countries, but in the United States, we are looking at 4 million birds had been killed. And we just had another 3.5 million culled in the last week. 4 million up through the beginning of this week, and then this week we've lost another 3.5 million. Depending on when you're watching this, right? I'm producing this on Sunday, but basically talking about the prior week. Over the last 7 days from this video, 3.5 million birds culled. That's been in Iowa as well. South Dakota, 85,000, and then Wisconsin as well. So we have massive numbers of birds being culled in the United States, and it's escalating very quickly as that has spread. It is showing up in over 20 states in the United States, and it is showing up in many countries out there. I believe 22 countries in the European Union alone, because they have relatively good reporting. But it's also showing up in a lot of places where good reports are not had and testing facilities are not had. So as you can see, the food supply is under attack around the world for a variety of reasons. Weather in South America, weather in the United States, conflict there, and then we also have weather related in China as well. So massive disturbances happening out there. So it's not just panic out there. The hard numbers are not looking good. We had bad harvests last year, and we're having bad harvests so far this year. Where's all the food going to come from? We have more people now than we did before the whole cough started, and we have a lot less food. You might want to get it while you still can.
When the world is falling apart outside, sometimes the safest place you can be is your own home or apartment. With recent events in our nation, including rioting and protesting, it has left many feeling unsafe to venture out. If things were to make a turn for the worst, are you prepared for an extended period indoors? Are you prepared for bugging in instead of bugging out? Even during a global pandemic, some have found it difficult to remain in their homes for any significant amount of time. Their dependence on food delivery and other outside services have become apparent. Can you imagine how difficult it would have been for many if they also didn't have the internet or streaming entertainment services? Staying inside for an extended period of time requires the right environment prepared in advance and the right mental attitude. In this video, we'll look at the 7 tips to make your bugging in a survivable experience. Apartment units are not the ideal place to bug in during a disaster, primarily because of the lack of space they provide and issues with security. However, not everyone has a bug out place they can go to after a disaster, and leaving one's apartment is not always an option during a disaster. With so many people living in apartment buildings, preparing for a disaster is even more important. Apartment buildings present several challenges when it comes to prepping, but it can also be done, and in this video, we'll provide 7 tips on how you can bug in an apartment. We'll also identify the challenges that you'll face once you start doing your preparations. Number 1, preparing your environment. There are several challenges to being a prepper in an apartment. Space is one of the primary reasons why prepping in an apartment is a problem. A small space makes prepping harder since this limits your capacity to stock up on important supplies like food and water. You have to be creative in storing your supplies. There are numerous space-saving products out there that you can buy or build to provide you with the extra space you need to store your supplies. You can also maximize the space that you already have, like making use of the space under your bed or couch to store your items. You can also make use of vertical space, meaning stack your storage items so it uses minimal space in your apartment. Think in terms of a grocery store. Stock vertically and make sure you implement a rotation system so things don't expire and become useless. Apartment living also has a host of security concerns. Since apartment complexes are built to maximize space and fit as many people in as possible in a small area, this means you'll be packed in with many other people in a tight space. Having people nearby can both be a good thing and a bad thing. If you're lucky enough to have like-minded people living in your apartment complex, you can help each other out with prepping. But the reality is that most people will not prepare, which is why you'll need to have some safety measures in place. Consider upgrading your door lock, like installing a deadbolt if it doesn't have one yet. Also, get a door security bar to prevent any easy access to your doors. There are numerous cheap but good options out there that you can easily install and remove without damaging the door. If possible, give serious consideration to strengthening your door frame. One of the common ways that people enter illegally into a house or apartment is through a door. There are several products on the market which also allow you to strengthen your door frame. Cover your windows with blinds or light diffusion films and keep them closed when you're not home or after dark. With blinds, you prevent people from eyeing what's in your apartment unit. If your windows are accessible from the outside, you want to add security measures to make sure no one enters through your windows. Get to know your neighbors since this will help you find like-minded people and also avoid those who could be a threat to you during disasters. If you're dealing with a large space, consider installing detectors or security cameras to add to your protection. You also need to have the means to protect yourself and your family in case of a break-in. It's not uncommon to receive a notice that some people will need to come to your apartment to make an adjustment, do a repair, or check something. This kind of a scenario affects your privacy greatly since this allows people to enter your home and observe you in your safe environment. To ensure your privacy, even if certain people need to go into your apartment, you need to properly store important items so they're not visible or can be accidentally discovered. Consider putting those important items in a drawer or closet that you can lock. You can also place some of your emergency supplies in a closet or cupboard that you can lock so they're not visible to everyone coming in and out of your apartment. You don't always know who this individual is coming into your home to do the repair, so be sure to keep your preps private. Finally, beyond securing windows and doors, be prepared for defending your home. Whether that's a knife, self-defense training, a gun, or a can of bear spray, make sure your person is protected as well as your premises. The considerations you need to make depends on the unique environment of your apartment, but you will need to prepare your environment in advance. You won't always have time after the fact. Number 2, preparing supplies. Careful preparation has to be implemented for the supplies you will need for an extended bug-in scenario in an apartment setting. Since space is going to be a major problem when you're doing your preparations, It's imperative that you only prepare the basic and necessary items you will need during an emergency. You can use 5-gallon plastic buckets with lids as a dry storage space for your supplies. This will allow you to stack them and will provide an easy means for bugging out if your circumstances necessitate that. Food, of course, is one of the important supplies that you will need to have since you will need it in order to survive during a disaster. You'll need to focus your food preparation on non-perishable items. Not only will this help you in case you don't have a way to keep your refrigerator powered up during a power outage, but this also means you don't have to worry about food spoilage. Canned foods also have a long shelf life, but they are also perishable. They won't last forever and they're heavy to transport. For a week to a month bug-in period, canned goods can supplement your longer shelf life foods. Make sure the foods you're packing are high in calories. Foods that provide heavy calories, which you'll need more of during an emergency situation, are most valuable to you in a crisis situation. Special vanity diets quickly become irrelevant when food is linked to your survival. Consider storing foods that you can eat by just boiling in water or without even needing to cook it. This will save you the need to have an ample supply of fuel and cooking oil in your home. Water is the second essential supply you'll need to prepare for if you're bugging in an apartment. This is the trickiest supply you'll need to store since it can take up space in your apartment. But this doesn't mean that you should forego preparing water, since having access to clean water during an emergency can ensure that you'll survive. Having a small water tank or a container is the best way you can survive during an emergency, but space may prevent you from having this. Collapsible water tanks, water bricks that can easily slide under the couch and bed, water bobs that you can fill up in your bathtub at the start of an emergency, and water purification tablets are all good options if you have some forewarning of a disaster. Beyond food and water, the list of essentials for an apartment-dwelling city prepper is long. A first aid kit and supplies of medicines to deal with common illnesses or ailments like cold, cough, flu, upset stomach, and pain should be well stocked at all times. A toolkit that contains the basic tools you'll need like a hammer, some nails, screwdrivers, screws, and several rolls of duct tape can help you make repairs or help you repurpose things within your living space. Toilet paper has recently risen to prominence as a prepping supply. There are ways to compress toilet paper without damaging it if you want to save storage space. A 5-gallon plastic bucket with a lid can easily be repurposed as an emergency toilet, and bidets can easily be installed to conserve supplies, assuming water services are not disrupted. Feminine hygiene products are also essential. They can also be used for dressing wounds. But you'll need to have a source of power and light should electricity go down. You can store batteries for your flashlight or radio. Just make sure to constantly check the batteries since they have an expiration. Don't underestimate the value of a hurricane or emergency candle. You can also use a crank flashlight or a crank charger in case you run out of batteries, so you'll still have access to light and power. A small portable solar generator will be critical as long as you have a place where you can place your panels to get direct sunlight. It's also good to have several blankets stored in order to help you and your family stay warm during the winter. You can also consider using sleeping bags since they're better at keeping you warm, and it's easier to pack them in case you need a bug out of your apartment. Number 3. Plant foods. Though apartments have small spaces, that doesn't mean you can't plant vegetables and other edible plants to provide you with a long-term food solution. There are numerous vegetables and plants that only need a small grow area. I recently completed a video of the 25 best plants to grow in your apartment, so I won't get into too much detail here. What you need to prepare now is for the possibility that what you can produce is also all that you may have to survive upon. Mushroom kits require no light to grow. Sprouts and microgreens can provide you a harvest in as little as 7 days. There are a wide range of options for edible plants. And again, I encourage you to take a look at the video on 25 of the best options to grow in your apartment. You can't really ramp up a serious home growing operation, however, once a calamity is struck. It is something you need to establish somewhat in advance. While many people rule this out due to limited space, don't. An extended period of bugging in will require you to supplement your non-perishable food stores. Number 4. Prepare for fire. Keep your apartment prepared for fires. Another tip for bugging in an apartment complex is you need to prepare for fires. With so many people living in one complex, you're somewhat dependent upon other people in your building making good choices and practicing good safety measures. Imagine what can happen when the power goes out and everyone is suddenly reliant upon candles and barbecues. That's potentially a great number of people with very little experience, cooking with open flames on their decks and leaving unattended candles burning inside. You need to be prepared in case a fire breaks out in your apartment or in your neighbor's apartment. You'll need fire extinguishers and fire blankets to use to fight fires. Know where the fire exits are in case you need to evacuate the premises, and always have some of your prepared bug-out supplies ready in case any fires forces you to flee for survival. Consider having protective masks for you and your family in case you need them to avoid inhaling toxic fumes. Smoke inhalation kills quickly, so keep a gas mask handy that might give you the minutes you need to survive and escape if that's something you're able to afford. I'll provide links in the description section below if you want to check out some of the options I personally use. Number 5. Be the gray man. I mentioned earlier the importance of getting to know your neighbors enough so they know who you are, but not too much that they know everything about you. Well, this basically is you becoming a gray man or woman. You're visible enough to be one of the crowd, but not standing out so much that you're attracting extra attention from everyone. It's important that you avoid bragging to everyone that you are a prepper, since you are making yourself a target during emergency situations. Not everyone will be prepared when a disaster strikes, so telling everyone that you're a prepper is like inviting them to knock at your door during a disaster when they need a candle, a cup of beans, water to cook them, batteries for the radio, and so on. Observe OPSEC, or operational security, by keeping your prepping a closely held secret. Be a friendly face in your apartment complex, enough where people have concern for your well-being, but not enough that you're the go-to person. You may want to help a few people, and that's great. If you do, always downplay your supply levels and ask the person not to share that you've helped them out. This will keep a horde of neighbors showing up at your door. Number 6. Plan your escape. Look for alternative escape routes, like a house, where there are usually several doors to exit and enter the house. Most apartment units will only have one door for the entrance and exit. That's why you'll need to be able to find an alternative exit from your unit should the door become inaccessible. You need to have a plan to escape via your apartment's windows should the door become inaccessible, or in a worst case scenario, prepare for the potential that you may have to break the door down if you don't have the tools necessary. A retractable window fire ladder is essential if you live on an upper floor. Can you escape to the roof, across the roof, and down another stairwell? Can you escape out the back door instead of the main street? Can you easily grab your supplies and escape? In addition to having a pre-made bug-out bag, what other prepping supplies can you easily pack up and bug out with if necessary? Number 7. Have a plan to bug out. After you have made all your preparations for bugging into an apartment, it's important that you should not rule out the possibility that you will still need to bug out. Whether the circumstances of your original need to bug in have changed, or, like I mentioned earlier, a fire breaks out and forces you to evacuate, you may need to flip your bug-in plan to a bug-out plan. You need a plan for a bug-out location, which is outside the city that you're living in and is potentially unaffected by the disaster. You also need to have multiple routes outlined on how to get there from your apartment. Will you travel by vehicle, on foot, or by bicycle? What routes are you going to take, and what other alternative routes will you have in case the original route is unpassable? You also need to prepare a bug-out kit that will contain everything you need and everything you can easily grab. Make sure the kit will have enough supplies to last you for the duration of the travel and for at least a few days of stay to your bug-out location. Realize also what additional things you might need to grab from your supplies before needing to abandon them altogether. Make sure anything you leave behind is well hidden in case the opportunity to return to your apartment becomes a possibility. Bugging in an apartment is challenging, and it presents many more difficulties than even a suburban house. But with the right planning and some creative solutions, especially in terms of storage space, you can still survive a disaster or emergency situation even if you're living in an apartment. Prepare your environment, prepare your supplies, prepare for fire, keep your plans a secret, plan escape routes, and prepare for the fact that you may eventually have to bug out.
Designed to help you confidently identify 5 common plants in the UK, and these plants can all be found in spring and summer, which is the best time to be learning foraging. So I've chosen these plants for 3 reasons. They're all common in most of the UK and Europe, they're nice and easy to identify, and that they're quite easy to tell from any poisonous plants. This is dandelion. All parts of this plant are edible. This is probably the plant that I eat most of, because I'll pick some most mornings to have in a green smoothie. The leaves are nice to eat them raw. You can have them in salad. They can be a little bit bitter, so you can also cook them to take away some of the bitterness. The dandelion is very common and can be picked all year. The leaves are better in spring before the flowers have opened. You can see they're just about starting to open here. The good thing about dandelion is that you can just keep picking the leaves and they will grow back. The leaves of dandelion are very deeply toothed, and the central stem, also called the midrib, sometimes has a bit of a purple colour like that one there. The yellow flowers are also edible. I like to just chuck them in a salad sometimes for a bit of colour. And the stems, the flower stem, is smooth and hollow. And when you cut them or pick them, you'll get a milky white sap come out of them. And dandelion roots are edible as well. I rarely bother with them though, I don't think they're very nice, and there's much better roots around. If you do want to give them a try, just make sure you do it on your own property, in your own garden, because it is illegal to dig up wild plants on public land or on private land without the landowner's permission. The most important rule to stick to if you're going to start foraging is if you pick a plant, you've got to be able to identify it 100% before you eat it. If you've got any doubts about it, just don't eat the plant, and it's better to pick it, take it home and research it from some foraging books, or to go out with a professional or experienced forager. Another plant I eat a lot of in spring and early summer is the stinging nettle. This is actually one of the most nutritious plants we have here in the UK. And it's a good idea to wear gloves when you're picking it if you don't want to get stung. And what you want to do is just pick the top part, the growing part, because that is where most of the nutrition is. And cooking the nettle will take away the sting. So you can ID the nettle by the leaves, which are quite sharply toothed, and they grow in opposing pairs that alternate up the stem. So you see the leaves join at the same point on the stem, and then they alternate up the stem. So two that way and then two on the other side, and that goes all the way up the stem. There's not really much you can mistake the nettle for, apart from maybe the dead nettles, which look very similar. They are edible as well. And also the dead nettles do not sting. The only thing you really need to be aware of when picking nettles is that you should avoid eating nettles in the summer when they have started to flower, because when the plant is in flower, the leaves can contain crystals that upset the urinary tract. So yeah, it's best to only eat in the spring or early summer, or it's also okay if the plant has been cut back and you get fresh growth. It's only when the plant has flowers on them. You can also eat the seeds of stinging nettles. I've done a video on that. I'll leave a link in the description of this video. Wild garlic is often one of the first plants a forager learns. It has a distinctive onion garlic smell when you crush the leaves, and this is good for the forager because an onion smell means it's in the onion or allium family, and all alliums are edible. In fact, all parts of allium plants are edible, from the seeds, flowers, leaves, stems, and even the bulbs underground, although you should never dig up any plant unless you have the landowner's permission. Wild garlic has long, narrow leaves and it has a pronounced white midrib on the underside, and the veins in the leaf run parallel to that midrib. And the leaves are straight edged, so there's no teeth or lobes. The plant to be aware of when picking wild garlic is lily of the valley, which is highly toxic. The leaves of both plants look fairly similar, but as long as you're checking the leaves have that strong oniony garlic smell, then it's fine. Also, the leaves of wild garlic grow as a single leaf per stem that grow from the base of the plant, whereas lily of the valley will have several leaves per stem. Wild garlic leaves can usually be found from late February depending on your location, and look for wild garlic in shady woodlands. The unopened flower buds usually appear from around early April, although these ones are starting quite early in mid to late March here. That's one of the flower buds there, which will open into a small white flower. Another thing to be aware of when you're picking wild garlic, and this applies to foraging any plant really, is to take care and only pick one leaf at a time, not be grabbing handfuls, because it can be quite easy to pick out other plants as well, like grown in the same habitat as this wild garlic. Here is an arum lily, and these are poisonous. And while the bigger leaves are quite easy to tell the difference from wild garlic, if you look at some of the younger leaves, like that here, that can quite easily be picked in amongst your wild garlic. So yeah, there's some more there. So yeah, just be very careful, pick out one plant at a time, and until you're really familiar with the leaf, it's probably a good idea to check the smell, the onion smell on every leaf, because these ones, the arum lilies, they don't have a scent. And if you're completely new to foraging, it is a good idea to learn any of the poisonous plants that might be growing in the area. Another little safety tip is to be careful where you're picking plants from. Be careful around fields, like farmers' fields, because if plants are looking like they're dying off when they're still in season and going yellow, there's a chance the farmer might have sprayed them with pesticides. And also be careful of pathways where there's a lot of dog walkers, because you don't really want to be picking plants that dogs have weed on. This is clover. There are lots of different species of clover, but you'll usually find either white or red clover, which you can tell later in the summer by the colour of the flowers. They've got a nice mild pea flavour, and they are a member of the pea family. Clover normally has 3 leaves, and they have a white chevron arrow on the leaves. The only thing you'll really mistake clover for is wood sorrel, which has a similar looking 3 leaves, but they're heart-shaped. And there you can see the leaves and the stems of clover are quite hairy. You can eat the leaves and the flowers of clover. The leaves will start appearing in March, and the flowers from around May or June. You'll find clover in pretty much any patch of grassland. They especially like land that's been well trodden, so maybe like a path in a field. And you can test this out by looking in your garden. If you've got a lawn, then check the bits of lawn that you walk over the most, like maybe heading towards a shed, and there's a good chance you'll find clover along that track. So please remember to forage sustainably. Don't strip a whole area bare of the plants. Make sure you're leaving some for wildlife and enough for the plants to recuperate and grow again next year. This is the bramble bush. Nice easy one to identify, and they grow on pretty much any patch of wasteland or in city parks. The leaves are oval and sharply toothed. These are actually the leaves from last year that have stayed on the bush over winter. And the stems are long and trailing, usually with a bit of a reddish tinge to them, and the thorns, which are very sharp, are usually red as well. So the bramble bush is what produces blackberries, which you can pick usually from late summer through to around October. This time of year though, in the spring, what we're after is this fresh bright green growth here, and this is the new stems and leaves forming, and these are edible. Just pick them off and you can eat them raw, although I find they've got a bit of a strange flavour raw. What I like to do is just lightly fry them in butter, and they're quite nice like that. And it's a good example really of foraging. You want to eat with the season, so it's whatever the plant is putting its energy into at that point of the year. So now in the spring, the plant is putting its energy into the fresh growth, the leaves, so that's what you want to be eating. In the summer and autumn, it's putting its energy into the fruit, so you want to be eating the fruit then. And with other plants, maybe in the winter, they'll be putting the energy into its roots. So plants that have edible roots, that's probably when you want to be eating them, in the winter.